joining us for our Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery webinar this afternoon. I am Donna Hall, and I'm the Director of Business Development here at OnPar Technologies. And for the next 30 minutes to an hour or so, I'll be giving the presentation. If you have any questions or want to comment on the presentation, feel free to enter a message in the chat window. And at the end, we'll answer those questions and read those comments. So with data today and small businesses in general, there's a perfect data storm brewing. And what we mean by that is the amount of data that is out there and the risk of losing that data and the value of that data is dramatically increasing in all three areas. So the amount of data that's currently being stored, it's more than doubling every 2 years. So if you think about your own business and you think about the data, or even maybe on your own desktop, if you think about the data that you had stored 2 years ago, and now that that's doubling, and everybody in your organization is also doubling, then you can see how the term big data has been created. So as that data increases and the data that's being stored increases, because nobody wants to delete anything these days, the value of that is also increasing. So if you look at the metrics of like Facebook and Uber and all of these companies now that are collecting the analytics of consumers and using that data to determine buying habits, that's big data on a very large scale. So that value of that data is amazingly expensive, and to lose that data would be detrimental to their portfolio, to their stock offerings, to their business. If we look at it on a smaller scale, on your individual business, that data, your data, is just as important as Facebook's data is to them. And so the value of that data to your business is very high, in that you need to protect that and protect your business assets. So there's also a greater risk of losing that data. So if we look at Hurricane Sandy, that's, and all the other hurricanes that have come through, Hurricane Ivan, and everything that's been happening from an environmental standpoint, those are, large catastrophic disasters that can happen to a business. You can also have a security breach or a server failure, which is more likely to happen than your building either being destroyed by an environmental disaster or by anything other than a failure of the equipment. So not only do you have all this data, you've got the value of it increasing, and you've got a greater risk of losing it. So what do you do about that? How do you combat all of this, and how do you evaluate it? So it's not a matter of if, but when something is going to happen at your organization. If you're one of the lucky ones and you haven't lost data of any way, shape, or form, then you're in a very small minority. Because if we just look at it from the PC standpoint, 25% of PCs will fail this year. So if you have 100 PCs in your environment, then a quarter of those fail. Think about how much data you could potentially lose if that data is not being protected in some way. 24% of the companies that experience, they will have experienced a full data disaster. So that simply says that there's a huge percentage of companies out there that have not only experienced a loss of their data, but potentially their buildings as well. And so they've experienced a catastrophic event. So if we look at some other percentages, 30% of the companies that have tape backups, they fail to test those, and 70% of those that do test and have the tape backup have determined that those failed. So it's old technology. It's not reliable anymore, and so it's not a very good way to protect your business. And 70% of small businesses that experience a major data loss, they go out of business within a year. So there's a lot of numbers thrown at you, a lot of percentages coming at you, but you can see that it's very high risk if you're not backing up your data in many different ways. So what we like to do is we like to look at the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective. And we'll talk a little bit about these in more detail as we go through the presentation, but recovery time objective is how long can your business be down without it affecting your bottom line. Most people say never, we cannot have any downtime, but they haven't done anything to prevent them from never having downtime. Some people say it can be seconds, minutes, hours, or days. Most people cannot go more than a day without their emails, without their main line of business applications. Some people think they can go a week, but if they were down for a week, then they would seriously be reevaluating that. So that's the recovery time objective. The recovery point objective is simply how much data could you lose. If you back up last night and you had a server failure at 3 p.m. today, your last backup was last night, well, you're going to lose roughly a day's worth of work. So is that acceptable? So that's your recovery point objective. So we look at the small business and why their data is in such, why are you at such a greater risk? Well, most people don't have the resources to prevent a data disaster. Some people don't even know that they need to protect their data. I know that sounds kind of insane at this point, but that is true. A lot of people think that because their data is in certain situations that it's being protected, and it really isn't. And in an SMB, your data is very valuable. It's also because you can't really afford to reproduce that data, or you don't have a way to reproduce it if something happens to it. And you also can't afford not to produce revenue. So if you think about your business in a small business market, if you're producing $5,000 worth of revenue a day and you're not able to do that simply because your systems are down or you can't access the data, then that's a huge revenue impacting disaster in your world. You can also have a loss of competitive edge. Can be a negative impact. If a customer calls you up to place an order and you can't fulfill that order, or even look at an order that, even look to see if you have the inventory, then that could be a problem as well. So we just have to really think about how you access your data and how you're using your data on a daily basis, and understand that the risks to that. Some of our clients may have a potential regulation of non-compliance issue if they lose data, such as HIPAA, Sarbanes, and in different areas like that. So there can be several risks in the SMB. So the other thing that we want to point out with business continuity and disaster recovery is that downtime is a business concern. It often gets pushed over onto as an IT function, especially if the downtime is unplanned. But at the end of the day, it should be the business, the decision makers of the business, that understand what the value of their data is and what the value of the uptime and keeping their employees working. Because it has to be looked at as a business decision to invest in business continuity and disaster recovery, not just as an IT function. And the reason we say that is IT is going to get blamed if the data is not accessible or the data is lost. But if the company hasn't made a conscious effort to invest in the disaster recovery and business continuity solution to keep the business up and running and protected, then it's a business decision that just wasn't made. Maybe they didn't know to make it. So it's our place to educate the business owners and the decision makers on what's out there and how to protect your data. So an average mid-sized company is going to have 16 to 20 hours of network, system, or application downtime per year. If you think about that, that's 2.5 working days. That's a lot of time for you not to have access to your data or your systems. And by implementing our solution for business continuity, we can drastically reduce that. So you also want to make sure that you're meeting those compliance regulations. If you are required to meet HIPAA, you're required to keep that data for X number of years. It was 7, now I think it's 10. I'm not exactly sure of the exact number of years now. But if you lose that data, then you could be, you could have some compliance concerns there because you don't have that patient information that you need. So when we look at protecting your data and protecting your business, all companies are going to have insurance for their building, probably going to have insurance for their employees. Why wouldn't you have protection for your business data? So the odds are that you're going to protect the servers or the PCs that it is sitting on, but in most situations, insurance is not going to cover that. The odds are that you'll use your backup and disaster recovery solution before you'll actually use your insurance for a disaster. And the reason being is that equipment fails and data can be lost. So you want to make sure that you have a good solution in place to protect that and to protect against downtime. So if you can prepare now and save later, or you can not prepare and spend later. We prefer the first, and I want to go through a little bit of a scenario of what our solution looks like. So this your building, this your office building, and your servers are residing in your location. At this point, they're not in the cloud. Even if they are in the cloud, you still may have some data on site that you need to back up to the cloud. So this is not an uncommon solution for people to have servers in their location. So when our clients do and they need to protect that data, what we do is we put a device on site, and it takes all of these servers and it takes an image of those, and it moves it over here to this device. We are a data partner, and there's different devices based on the need and the size and things like that. So we actually customize this for your specific data and for your specific uptime needs. And then what happens is that appliance takes those images and moves it to the cloud. So we had a client, and this was just a month or so ago, and their servers are sitting here and they're running. They had an end user who clicked on a link that's in an email that she thought was a safe link, and it turns out that it wasn't. And one of their servers in their environment here was infected with the crypto locker. I'm not sure how much you know about CryptoLocker, but what CryptoLocker does is it takes the files and it locks them, and it holds them for ransom. And it's very, very prevalent. These people are making billions of dollars off of this virus, and the government, the NSA, and everybody, basically worldwide, nobody's been able to catch them because it's a very, very sophisticated operation. So, and there's new threats coming out daily. There's variants of that CryptoLocker called CryptoWall and a few other things, CryptoLocker clones that are out there. And they hold that data for ransom, and if you don't have a good backup of it, your only choice is to A, pay that ransom in Bitcoins and hope that you get your data back, or recreate that data. Most people cannot recreate that data because it's typically too much. And if this isn't caught in time, it's going to run through that entire environment. Well, luckily, the virus was caught in time, and within a 30-minute time span, we had determined what the problem was and was able to shut one of their servers down. And we failed them over to the cloud while we determined how to resolve their problem. So their employees were like, down less than 30 minutes on one server, and then they started operating up here in the cloud. We took a backup from here and restored their files, backup that was not affected by the CryptoLocker. Restored their files. They didn't lose any data, and we moved them back from the cloud once we had everything restored. So essentially, they paid for our time to do this. Obviously, they invested in the box and in the cloud solution, but it cost them a little less than $500 for us to perform everything that we did to get them shut down off of this server, move them to the cloud, then move them back. So had they not planned for that, if they didn't prepare, they would have paid for it later. And essentially, if they didn't have that backup and they couldn't have gone to the cloud, they would have had multiple employees down for multiple hours or maybe even days. So if we look at what it costs to even try to recreate, if you can recreate the data, you can see the numbers here that they're staggering depending upon the type of data that it is. Engineering data, those, that's a lot of design. It's a lot of things that go into that. $98,000 for just 20 megabytes of data. It's incredible. And the National Computer Security Association, they won't even put a price on medical data because sometimes you can't even recreate it because of the compliances and things like that. So you just have to look at what your data is doing, and does it make sense to buy what I'll call insurance and invest in a disaster recovery business continuity solution. So how does all this add up, and what's your cost of downtime? Well, when you look at it, if your business processes cease, if you're not able to bill or provide HR services, then that's a cost of downtime. If you lose sales, if sales has no access to customer or product data, well, you are going to lose sales. You're going to lose every company across the board. If something happens to their data, a server fails, or something causes them not to be able to access their data, they're going to have lost employee productivity because there's no systems there to keep them working. So all of these things would not come into play in every business, but most of them would. And if you miss deadlines that result in employee overtime, you have to think about that. There's just so many things that come into play that causes that cost of downtime. and it adds up. It adds up very, very quickly. And that's just if you can recreate your data. If you can't recreate your data, then you've got the cost on top of that for trying to recover your data, if it can even be recovered. So one thing I wanted to do today was I wanted to show you our recovery time calculator. This is a great tool. It's on our website, and I'll be glad to send you the link for that if you want to run it for yourself. But this shows us the RTO and the RPO, which is what we talked about earlier, the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective. So I'm going to go out here to the website for a second, and I want to fill this in. So if I could just say we're going to do a recovery time objective, and we're going to say that we could be down for an hour. We want to recover within an hour. And our recovery point objective, let's put 24 hours. So we could afford to lose basically 24 hours worth of data. And if we say it's 250 gig, we'll leave that as the default. Most organizations are going to have at least 500 gig or a terabyte's worth of data, but we'll be very conservative here. And then for our process, how often do you currently back up these systems? We're going to say that we back those up every 12 hours. And how long does it take to initiate your recovery process? We're going to say an hour. With us, we could probably initiate that within 30 minutes, but we'll leave that as the default. Now, if we look at how many employees would be affected if critical systems fail, let's be conservative. We'll say 15. And what would the average wage of the affected employees be? Let's say that they're only making $15 an hour. And if we look at what the overhead cost or the fully burdened benefit of that is, it's typically a 30%, but we'll round that to $4. How about that? Then if we say how much revenue would be lost as a result of a system failure, let's say your company brings in $5,000 a day in revenue. So if we look at this, and we're going to hit our calculate button here, you can see it's very, very conservative numbers. If your critical system data was 250 gigs and your time between backups was 12 hours and your recovery process was an hour, your estimated downtime is 1 hour and 42 minutes. So if your employees are making $15 an hour and their overhead is $4 an hour and you lose the revenue of $5,000, that's an hour. So it's $5,229 an hour. And maybe that, I apologize, I thought that was for the day, but it is an hour, so we could go back and recalculate that very easily. But your total downtime cost would be $8,942 an hour if we were going to meet these recovery time objectives, if we were going to get you back up in 1 hour and 42 minutes. So actually, you can go back in here, and maybe we're making $1,000 an hour. How about that? Let's do that. And you can still see that with these very conservative numbers, your total downtime cost per hour, $2,102. And you're taking all of this other stuff into consideration, and your system would not even cost you this, depending upon the amount of data. Most people are not even paying this, for our cloud backup in 3-4 months. It just depends on the size. But if you look at what that costs you per hour, and you say, well, gosh, I can maybe do the cloud backup for $500 a month or whatever the amount is, depending upon your special circumstance, it's kind of a no-brainer. And it just makes sense to understand what your recovery time and your recovery point objective is for the business. And again, it's a business decision as to how that works and to what you want that to be. Hopefully that all makes sense. It makes sense to me, to me it's like, gosh, you can't afford not to do it because your data is so valuable and so important. So now for the good news is that there is a BDR solution that delivers intelligent business continuity to your business, an IT service provider who manages the entire process, and an ROI that will yield the financial and business benefits. So our solution is Datto, and we put a device on site, we back that up to the cloud, and we give you a turnkey solution. We're managing the device, so we're making sure that it's actually backing up. You can also get an email every day that tells you that yes, it backed up. We can do testing. We can meet the compliance requirements. You have the ability to keep the business running even in a disaster. We've had several situations where people have had downtime occur with their business critical servers and their business critical applications, and we have been able to restore them with our devices, and many of them, their employees may not even know that they had a problem, and at any other point in time it would have been a catastrophe for the business based on the solutions that they have had in place. So if you don't know if your business critical data is secure and backed up, then you definitely need to be having this conversation with us. If you don't know if the business has the ability to stay up and running even in a disaster, you need to be having this conversation with us. If you could not do a complete data restoration, then you would want to have this conversation with us. So what this has done for businesses is gives them a competitive advantage over the people who don't do this and invest in the disaster recovery business continuity solution. Many times if you're trying to get a contract with a company and you tell them that you have this in place, and sometimes it may be a requirement that you have this in place, then that's definitely an added business value. You're also going to have peace of mind for your business and your clients. If you can go to bed at night and know that if something happens to your data and that it's protected in multiple places, that's peace of mind, and that's knowing that you've invested in the right technology. And we're going to meet those compliance standards. So it's, our solution is an intelligent business continuity solution that trumps a traditional backup. A traditional backup recovery can take weeks following a disaster. With us, it's reduced to hours or minutes or even seconds, depending upon what the problem is. I don't know how many of you are using a traditional backup, but if someone goes on vacation and they're responsible for changing out the tapes, and they forget and nobody's watching it, then that's a human error. It's very high risk. This is fully automated. You take the human component out of it. Once it's set up, it's monitored and maintained by us, and it's a fully automated backup process. Like I said, you can get an email to make sure that it is actually backing up, but you don't have to worry about it. I don't know if you've ever tried to restore from a backup, even one file, but it's difficult, and it's even more difficult to test. Well, our screenshot backup verification is very intuitive, and it's very easy to test a backup. A traditional backup, it's expensive and timely to make multiple backups. Each of our backups is saved on the local appliance, and it's also saved across bi-coastal data centers. So you're going to have multiple iterations in our backup. Typically, the way it works is we will sell you a year's worth of unlimited storage in the cloud. The boxes have a certain amount of storage on them, and so we spec that out based on your specifications. But in the cloud, it's unlimited, and so it will keep everything in the cloud for 1 year. And then after, if the deleted files have been deleted, they will be gone from the service after 365 days. So on the 366th day, the deleted files would be removed. But each backup is saved, and you don't have to worry about somebody having the tape, in their briefcase or something, and it's sitting in the car and getting too hot and warped, and the data just not being protected like it should be. So in a traditional backup, when your backup continues to grow, and remember how we talked about it in the beginning, is data is constantly growing, it's doubling every 2 years, those backup speeds are going to be slower. So the backup speeds are way much faster, and we can prioritize critical data to run over the wire and to make things run a lot more smoothly. We can back up at different times, and it doesn't have to be managed so closely as a traditional tape. Physical to virtual conversions can be time consuming, and they have a high failure rate when you're in a traditional backup. Ours are incremental backups and can be instantly virtualized rather than the entire backup chain. So what that simply means is we're taking the last backup and then we're meshing the incrementals into that and restoring. So it makes things a lot faster, and instantly virtualizing is getting all your applications and all your data, not just your files, whereas traditional tape backup is just files. So most of the time if you have traditional backup, there's no redundant backups in multiple locations. Like I showed you before, we've got the servers, we've got the device on site, the data device that's backing up, and it's in the cloud, and it's in multiple data centers. So the chances of you losing data are very, very slim. It's a minimal risk. And the limited options for encrypting data may not pass industry regulations in a traditional backup. Datos is all encrypted. It's got the regulations. It's got the HIPAA. It's got the SOX. It ensures that that data is safe and meets those industry regulations. There's many different organizations in the data centers. There's banks. There's doctors' offices. There's high-end businesses. There's small businesses just like yourself, but they all want to ensure the same safety and encryption, so it's encrypted end-to-end when it hits the cloud. When recovering data, the tape failure rate is about 50%. So I don't know if anyone's ever had to recover from a tape backup, but it's very painful. Again, it's old technology, so we want to get that out of there. There's minimal risk for corrupted backups or data loss in our business continuity and disaster recovery solution. In fact, we haven't had any, and we've got many testimonials to where we've been able to restore. And the potential theft from a tape. I mean, actually, this one it makes me laugh at some point, because if anybody would want to try to steal data from a tape backup, sometimes it's like more power to them, but because it's very hard to get data off of that, and you got to have the device and all that. But there's still a potential because you have a physical piece that you're actually carrying off site. So these backups are stored in the data centers with all the compliance. So basically, we look at backup and disaster recovery and business continuity. It's kind of a one-two punch. We want to make sure that you always have to make sure you have a backup, and lots of people will make sure they have that backup, but they don't go to that next step. They don't go to that next step to do with disaster recovery, and they don't go to that next step where they have business continuity. So if you can get all of that in one place, if you can get a secure backup of your business data and a timely recovery of your operations following a disaster, and you can maintain network uptime and maintain critical operations. Then you've got that 1-2 punch, and it all just works together. And that's what we sell at OnPar in our solution with Datto. So we take all the technology and the support, and we wrap it all into one. So we've got the intelligent business continuity, we've got the off-site virtualization, we've got your RTO, your RPO, the end-to-end encryption, the bicoastal data centers. It's a better bare metal restore just because of the technology that's invested in. And it's going to give you a 24/7, 365 US-based tech support. Typically that tech support comes through us. We initiate that with Datto, and if we need to get them involved, then we would. But if you have a disaster and you've got Datto, then we're going to be able to get you back up and running much more quickly than if you didn't have this solution. And the other piece of this is if you fell over to the cloud, I was explaining to you earlier that we had a client who actually fell over to the cloud, and they were only down, you know, a little less than 30 minutes, but they fell over to the cloud for a couple of days until we could find the time to get them back up and running. Due to we couldn't interfere with their business operations, so we had to schedule a time with them to move them back from the cloud to their local server. And as long as you're not running on the cloud for more than 30 days in a month's time, then or in a year's time, I'm sorry, 30 days in a year's time, then that cloud failover there's no charge for that. Now, a lot of solutions will ding you really, really hard when you do have a disaster. They kind of hit you hard when you're down because they know the insurance is going to pay for that. But with this, you can declare a disaster because your server's down. As long as you don't run more than 30 days in the cloud in a year on the virtual servers, then that's included in your monthly fee. And that's pretty substantial when you think about what it will cost to run in the cloud for 30 days. So our business continuity is built for businesses for every size. There's what I like to call the Cadillac, which is a Cirrus 2. They all do basically the same thing. Just some of them allow you to fail over to the device locally, and some of them allow you to fail over to the cloud, and some of them allow you to fail over to the device and to the cloud. So you just really have to, again, we have to have a conversation around that to determine what the best fit is for your business, and we would be glad to do that with you at any point in time if you wanted to have a conversation with us. Now I'm going to open it up to questions. If you have any questions whatsoever, be glad to answer those questions. I'll just unmute everyone here, and if you want, you can ask a question or you can type it into the chat window. Feel free to follow us on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. Got lots of information. We'll be glad to share any of this with you and have more conversations with you. And I'm not seeing any questions, so if no one has any questions, then that's our presentation for today, and we appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to providing you with a business continuity and disaster recovery solution. Thanks everybody, and have a great day.